All right. Hello, everybody. I hope your weekend day has been great. I decided to change the time to 4 today so that everybody could be home and not doing any school. So hello to everybody from all different places in the world, from Russia, from the countryside, from different cities. So today we're actually going to start a short book called Swiss Family Robinson. This was one of my favorite books that was read to me when I was small, and today we're going to read the first few chapters. And it's a short book, and it won't take very long to finish. I hope you enjoy, though. It's a great adventure and really interesting to listen to. Swiss Family Robinson by Johann Wyss. Chapter 1, A Shipwreck. The storm had been going on for 6 days. We were so far from the right course that no one on board knew where we were. Our courage was sinking. The masts had been cut down. The boat sprang several leaks and began to fill with water. My 4 sons, Fritz, Ernest, Jack, and young Francis, clung to me in fright. My wife, Elizabeth, wiped the tears from her cheeks. We all fell to our knees and began to pray. At this moment, a cry of "Land! Land!" was heard through the roaring of the waves. Instantly, the ship struck against a rock. Everyone was thrown down. There was a tremendous cracking, as if the ship were going to pieces. The sea rushed in from all sides. The vessel had run aground. It could not hold together for long. The captain called out that all was lost and told the sailors to put out the lifeboats. The words fell on my heart like a dagger. The children broke out in cries. I tried to calm them, saying that the water had not yet reached us. The ship was near land, and there was still hope. I went on the deck, and a wave threw me down. Another followed, then another. A disaster met my eyes. The ship was shattered in all directions. The ship's company crowded into the lifeboats till the boats could not hold one person more. They cut the ropes. I called to them frantically to wait for us, but in vain. The roaring of the sea was too loud, and the waves, which rose to the height of the mountains, made it impossible for them to return anyway. The boats were driven out of sight. I took comfort in seeing that the cabin, which held my family, had been driven upwards between 2 rocks and was now safe. At the same time, in the distance, I could see through the clouds and the rain several nooks of land. There was no chance of human help, yet it was my duty to appear calm before my family. "Courage," I cried on entering the cabin. "We will find a way to reach land safely." The children believed me, but Elizabeth saw the anxiety eating away at me. The storm raged on in full fury. The planks and beams of the ship separated with horrible crashes. We thought of the lifeboats and feared they must have sunk under the foaming water. We prepared a small meal. The boys ate, but Elizabeth and I had little appetite. The children went to bed and, exhausted, soon were snoring soundly. Elizabeth and I sat up, afraid and anxious. We passed this awful night and welcomed with joy the first gleam of the light in the morning. The winds had died down, the sky had become peaceful, and hope throbbed in my chest. But how would we get to land? Ernest wanted to build a raft. "That would be a good idea," I answered. if we had the materials to make one. But come, my boys, look around the ship and see what you can find that might help us. I checked the supply of food and water. Elizabeth and young Francis visited the animals who had been taken on board at the beginning of the trip. They were sick with hunger and thirst. My son Jack checked the captain's cabin. Scarcely when he had opened the door, two large dogs sprang upon him. They were just hungry. Jack jumped on the larger dog's back. I laughed and praised his courage, but told him to be gentle with the animals. He called the dogs Turk and Flora. By and by, my little company assembled around me, and each boasted of what he had to contribute. Fritz had 2 guns, some gunpowder, and some shot and bullets. Ernest found nails, a hatchet, a hammer, and other tools. Even Francis had a large box filled with what he called some little sharp-pointed hooks. Good, I said. Francis has brought the most valuable item, a box of fish hooks. Elizabeth said, on board are a cow, a donkey, 2 goats, 6 sheep, lambs, and a pregnant pig. I've fed them all. Excellent, I said, except for Jack, who has brought 2 dogs, which will no doubt want to eat more than we have to give them. Ah, replied Jack, but if we can get to land, you will see that they will help us in hunting. True, I said, but tell me, how are we to get to land? It can't be difficult, said Jack. Look at these large tubs. Why can't each of us get into one and float there? It is worth a try. Quick, then, boy, give me the saw. I remembered seeing some empty casks in the ship's hold. We hoisted them onto the lower deck, which was by now scarcely above water. I instantly began sawing them in 2. In a short time, I had produced 8 tubs. I viewed them with delight, but my wife sighed deeply as she looked at them. Never, never, cried she, can I venture into one of these. Not so fast, I said. My plan is not yet complete. I then found a long plank and placed my 8 tubs on it. We nailed the tubs to the plank and added more planks. When we finished, we'd made a narrow boat divided into 8 compartments. But now we discovered that the boat was so heavy we couldn't lift it. I told Fritz to find a crowbar. In the meantime, I sawed a thick round pole into several pieces to make some rollers. I then easily raised the front of the boat, while Fritz placed the rollers under it. To our great joy, we succeeded in rolling the boat into the water. We had spent the day hard at work, and it was already late. We couldn't have reached land that evening, so we had to spend a second night in the wrecked vessel, which at every instant threatened to fall to pieces. I tied the life jackets made of casks around my 3 youngest sons and my wife, in case the storm should return. One and all crept into our separate hammocks. Now, more calm and hopeful than the day before, a sound sleep prepared us for the next day's labors. Chapter 2. Land. By morning, we were all awake, for we were too hopeful to remain asleep. I said, the first thing to do is to give each animal on board a hearty meal. We will put out enough food for a few days. We can't take them with us now, but we'll try to return and fetch them later. Are you all ready? We loaded our little boat with guns and gunpowder, shot and bullets, a chest containing dried soup, another full of hard biscuit, an iron pot, a fishing rod, a chest of nails, another filled with tools, and lastly, some sailcloth to make a tent. We put 10 hens and 2 roosters into one of the tubs. We set the geese, ducks, and pigeons free, hoping they'd fly or swim towards the land. Lastly, my wife loaded a large bag into one of the tubs. We had so many things that we had to leave some behind. In the first tub sat my wife. In the second, our youngest son Francis, a lovely boy of 6, sweet and happy. In the third, Fritz, almost 15 years of age, a handsome curly-haired boy full of intelligence and activity. Next came Jack, a light-hearted, daring lad, 10 years old. Then came our son Ernest, 12 years old, thoughtful and smart, but somewhat lazy. Lastly, I, who would steer the boat with a makeshift rudder. Each one of us held an oar, and near each was a life jacket made of casks. We felt prepared for anything, and we set sail. The boys devoured with their eyes the land they saw at a great distance. We rowed with all our strength. The 2 dogs, seeing that we had abandoned them, plunged into the sea and swam to our boat. They were too large for us to let them get in, and I feared they might jump in and flip the boat. What was more, I thought they wouldn't be able to swim so far. The dogs, however, managed quite well. When tired, they rested their forepaws on one of the paddles, then swam on. We proceeded safely, though slowly. The nearer we got to the land, the more gloomy it looked. It seemed barren and rocky, but as we got closer, the shore's rough outline softened. Fritz, with his hawk eyes, saw some palm trees. Ernest said happily that we'd get much larger and better coconuts than we'd ever seen before. By and by, we came upon a little opening in the rocky shore toward the mouth of a creek. Our geese and ducks had already taken this route, so I followed in their course. This opening formed a little bay. The water was calm and neither too deep nor too shallow for our boat. We rowed into the nook until the boat gently glided up onto the shore. We all jumped eagerly on land. The dogs, who had already gone ashore, leaped around us in joy. The geese, ducks, roosters, and hens kept up a loud cackling. The boys chattered all at once. To this was added the screams of flamingos, which sat on the rocks at the entrance of the bay. We quickly unloaded the boat and found a place to set up a tent under the shade of the rocks. I sent my sons to look for grass and moss to make beds. I built a little kitchen near the tent. A few flat stones served as a hearth. I collected some dry branches and made a brisk, cheering fire. We put some of the dried soup with water into our iron pot and made dinner. Suddenly, I heard loud cries. It was Jack, in trouble. I grabbed my hatchet and ran to help him. He was on his knees in shallow water, and a large lobster had fastened its claws to his leg. The poor boy screamed and tried to shake the lobster free, but couldn't. I jumped into the water. As I jumped in, the lobster let go and would have scampered out to sea, but I grabbed it and carried it off, followed by Jack, who shouted in triumph all the way. Ernest, always thinking of a good meal, said to put the lobster in the soup, which would give it an excellent flavor. But his mother said no, that we had little food and that the lobster could make a whole dinner for the entire family. I complimented Jack on being the first to find something to eat. Ah, but I found something too, said Ernest. Oysters. And I would have gotten them too if they hadn't been in the water, so I'd have to get wet to catch them. Well, go and get them, I said. In a situation like ours, every member of the family must help out. No one can be afraid of something as small as wet feet. I'll do my best, said Ernest, setting off. But our problems soon increased. Look, said Elizabeth, I have made the soup, but how will we eat it without spoons or dishes? We can't each raise this boiling pot to our lips. We all looked at the pot in confusion. Then we burst into a hearty laugh at the thought of our problem. Ernest said, we can use oyster shells for spoons. Why, this is a useful idea, Ernest. Run and get some, I said. As Ernest and Jack did just that, we heard Fritz returning from his own exploring. He held 2 hands behind him. What have you brought? Asked his brothers. But Jack didn't wait for an answer and stole behind them. A suckling pig! A suckling pig! He cried. Fritz held it up for everyone to see. In fact, it was an agouti and not a pig at all. Fritz told us that he had passed over to the other side of a river. Ah, he said, the shore is low, and many casks and chests and planks have been washed ashore by the sea. Shouldn't we try to collect some of them? Patience, I said. There's a time for everything. But above all, did you see any trace of our ship's companions? Not the smallest sign, replied Fritz. We took our meal as the sun began to sink. Our flock of hens gathered around us, pecking morsels of biscuits that had fallen. Elizabeth produced the bag she had mysteriously put into the boat. She opened it and pulled out various grains. She scattered some for the hens, and they eagerly began to eat. Our pigeon roosted among the rocks. The geese and ducks took to a marshy bit of ground near some sheltering bushes by the sea. We too began our preparations to sleep. With the last rays of the sun, we entered our tent and laid ourselves down on the moss and grass. Each of us slept soundly, happy to be together and safe on land at last. Chapter 3. Exploring. Elizabeth and I were roused at the dawn of day by the crowing of the roosters. The children soon woke too. Even our lazy Ernest submitted to the hard fate of rising so early in the morning. For breakfast, he had lobster from the night before. Fritz and I prepared to explore the area and to look for any traces of our lost shipmates. We took hunting sacks, hatchets, guns, biscuits, and fresh river water. The others would remain near the boats, which would offer a speedy escape in case of danger. We all worried about what new trouble might occur on either side during our separation. We all melted into tears. As we left, our family sobs and goodbyes died away in the noise of the waves. Our faithful dog, Turk, followed after us. The banks of the river were steep and difficult to cross, except at one narrow pass. On the other side was an unbroken line of sharp, high rocks. We found some stones which had fallen into the riverbed. By stepping upon these and making some hazardous leaps, we reached the other side. We climbed the rocks and passed through some tall, tough, half-dried grass. There were a great many kinds of trees everywhere. We kept our eyes cast towards the smooth sea, looking for our shipmates, but we saw nothing of them. We rested under a tree by a stream, listening to birds singing in the trees. Fritz found a coconut on the ground, and we ate it, which meant we could save the food we'd brought along. It was a very old coconut, but this was no time to be choosy. We made a hearty meal of it and continued on. In the forest, we came upon some strange trees. Bottle gourds grew from their trunks. I knew that the thick rind of the fruit could be used to make plates, dishes, and flasks. Fritz jumped for joy. How happy mother will be, he said. I taught my son how to split the gourds and shape them. We soon completed 2 large plates and a few more small ones. I explained that we must leave the plates to dry in the sun. We'd pick them up on our return trip home. We filled them with sand to keep them from shrinking or wrapping. Then we went on. After a walk of about 4 leagues, we arrived at a spit of land that reached far out into the sea. On it was a tall hill. We climbed it with much effort and sweat. At the top, we could see in all directions. It was a scene of wild, lonely beauty. There was no trace of any human being. Filled with sadness, we lost hope for the other sailors. We descended the hill and made our way through a wood of palms. We went slowly, fearing at every step that a snake might bite us. I cut a reed stalk to serve as a club. As I did, a thick sap poured from its end. I tasted it and found it sweet and pleasant. These were sugar canes. I ate the sap and felt refreshed and strengthened. Fritz tasted joyfully. What a pleasure it would be to bring some back to the others. Fritz cut at least a dozen of the largest canes and dragged them along. We returned to the palm wood safely. Here, we stretched our legs in the shade and finished our meal. We were scarcely settled when we spied large monkeys in the topmost branches of the coconut trees. They were terrified of the sight of us and the barking of Turk, our dog. From the heights, they fixed their eyes on us, grinding their teeth, making horrible grimaces, and screaming. I thought we might get some of the fresh coconuts from the monkeys. I threw some stones, though I couldn't make them reach half the height of the monkeys. It didn't matter. The monkeys imitated me. They tore off the coconuts and hurled them down on us. With difficulty, we avoided the blows, but in a short time, many coconuts lay on the ground around us. Fritz laughed at our success. When there were no more coconuts left to throw, we set about collecting them. We split them between us and continued on our way home. Poor Fritz complained of being tired. I never would have thought a few sugar canes and coconuts could be so heavy. Yet how glad I will be when my mothers and brothers are tasting them. When we reached the place where we had left our gourd plates, we found them perfectly dry. We put them in our hunting bags and went on. As we passed through the wood, Turk sprang upon a troop of monkeys who were skipping about and amusing themselves. They fled, but a young one hid himself in the grass, and the dog seized it. Fritz flew like lightning to the rescue. The monkey sprang nimbly on Fritz's shoulders and fastened his feet in Fritz's hair. Fritz squawked and shook the monkey, but could not do anything to make him let go. I ran to them laughing because the animal was too young to do any harm. With a little gentleness, I succeeded in making him release my son. I took the creature in my arms as one would a baby. He was no larger than a kitten. "What shall I do with you, poor orphan?" I cried. "If I take you with me, how will I feed you? We already have more mouths to fill than food to put into them." "Father," cried Fritz, "do let me have this little monkey. Who knows, his instincts may one day help us to discover some good fruits." I agreed, and we resumed our journey. The monkey jumped on Fritz's shoulders. I carried the sugar canes and coconuts. We soon found ourselves on the riverbank, across from our family. Flora announced our approach by barking, and Turk, replied heartily. Our much-loved family appeared, with demonstrations of joy at our safe return. Elizabeth was pleased with everything we'd brought. We, too, were pleased when she saw the excellent meal she had cooked. She had created a turnspit from some wood she found and used it to roast a goose. Its fat ran into some oyster shells, which served as a dripping pan. Little Frances helped out by turning the spit. There was also a dish of fish, which the little ones had caught. The iron pot was bubbling with good-smelling soup. By the side of these stood one of the casks we had recovered from the sea. My wife had knocked the head out to find a cargo of some fine Dutch cheeses. We sat on the ground as Elizabeth put everything on her new dishes. My sons opened the coconuts, ate them, and then made some spoons with the fragments of the shells. By the time we had finished our meal, the sun was setting. We returned to the grassy mattresses in our tent, shaping some of the moss into a bed for the monkey. Feeling peaceful, we retired and soon fell into a deep and refreshing sleep. Chapter 4, the last chapter for today. Return to the wreck. The next morning, I told Elizabeth, "We must make a journey to the wrecked ship. We can bring back the cow and other important things. From moment to moment, we risk losing these because of a few big waves. On the other hand, we must also build a better home, secure from wild beasts. I don't know what to do first." Elizabeth replied, "I shudder at this thought of this voyage to the vessel because it's dangerous. But if it's necessary, it must be done quickly." "I will follow your advice," I said. Fritz and I would go. There was much to do, so we would spend the night on board. We readied our makeshift boat and set off in silence, both of us rowing. After great effort, we found ourselves at the vessel, fastened our boat securely to one of its timbers, and got out. First, Fritz went on to the main deck to feed the animals. Then we talked about what to do next. To my surprise, Fritz suggested making a sail for our boat. "But we have so many other important things to do," I said. "I found it very difficult to row for so long, Father. On our way back, the current will be against us, and our boat will be very heavy when it's fully loaded. I'm afraid I won't be strong enough to row back to land." "Aha," I said. "There is good sense in what you say. We'll make your sail." I helped Fritz carry poles for a mast and sail yard. Then I went to the sail room on the damaged ship and cut a large sail down to size. We also made a rudder for some oars. We spent the rest of the day loading our little boat with useful objects. The ship had many of the things we needed most. We took nails, cloth, tools, knives, forks, and spoons, and a complete assortment of kitchen utensils and pots. We found a strong telescope in the captain's cabin. We secured as much gunpowder and shot as we could for catching animals and defending ourselves against wild beasts. I took sacks of corn, wheat, other grain, and some potatoes. Another prize was a chest of choice eatables, including ham and sausage. Fritz reminded me that sleeping on the ground had been both cold and uncomfortable, and suggested some hammocks and blankets. We also took ropes, string, and a large roll of sailcloth. There was a chest containing dozens of young plants of every species of European fruits, which had been carefully packed in moss for the ship's voyage. I saw pear, plum, almond, peach, apple, apricot, chestnut trees, and vine shoots. There were sacks full of maize and oats and a hand mill for grinding grains. I took a sawmill, 2 harpoons, and 2 cannons, which had been mounted on the side of the ship. There was even a box of European books, which I held dear. In short, we'd have everything we needed to start a small colony. But by far, our greatest prize was a beautiful little sailboat called a pinnace, which had been taken apart and stored in the hull of the ship. It took us the better part of the day to put it together and then to launch it into the water. But when we were done, we had a wonderful vehicle for sailing. There were so many valuable things, and we could not take all of them. We'd have to leave much behind, but Fritz was already thinking about a second trip to the vessel. However, it was in such terrible condition that the smallest storm would make it go to pieces, and we weren't sure we could ever go near it again. The day had been filled with hard work, and night soon surprised us. A large blazing fire on the land greeted our sight. It was the signal from our family to assure us all was well. We tied 4 lanterns to our mast as the answer. All was well with us too. Then we slept. Early the next morning, though it was scarcely light, I looked through the telescope, hoping to see our beloved family on shore. Elizabeth was coming out of the tent, looking towards the vessel. The flag on shore told me that all were in good health and had remained safe through the night. Now that I have had a sight of your mother, I said to Fritz, my next concern is for the animals. Let's take some with us. We knew it would be too difficult to make a raft which would sail them to shore. We solved our problem by tying swimming jackets made of cork around each animal. The animal that we lowered into the water was a little lamb. As we watched it sink, I began to fear that it would drown, but then it reappeared, shaking the water from its head. In a few seconds, it had learned completely the art of swimming. Victory! I exclaimed, hugging my boy with delight. We lost not a moment in making more cork jackets. We tied onto each animal, cow, donkey, goats, lamb, and pig. Then we tied a length of cord around each animal, so we'd be able to draw them along behind our boat. Then we brought them near the edge of the vessel and shoved them off. They swam with grace. We had to work quickly now. We put on our cork jackets and got into our boat. Once we fastened the cord securely to the boat, we drew the animals after us. Finally, we hoisted our sail, which, filling with a favorable wind, bore us toward the land. We were proud of our success at so incredible a feat. But my thoughts were interrupted when Fritz exclaimed, "Help! Now we're lost! A huge shark!" "Why lost?" said I, half angry and yet half as frightened as he. "Be ready with your gun." The shark had nearly reached the boat, and with the speed of lightning had seized one of the goats. Fritz aimed and fired skillfully. The shark swam away, staining the water red with its blood. When the shark went, our fears and the wind drove us straight forward toward the bay. We found a convenient spot for the animals to land, and they stepped happily on shore. Our trip thus ended. We followed their example. Ernest and Jack ran to the boat and began to shout how much they admired the mast and sail. In the meantime, we began to unpack our cargo. Jack took off the swimming jackets from the sheep and goats, bursting from time to time into shouts of laughter at how ridiculous they looked. Seeing that there was no dinner cooking, I told Fritz to bring the ham we had gotten from the ship. "A ham!" cried one and all. "What a great supper we'll have!" And they clapped their hands. Elizabeth insisted that she hadn't forgotten dinner at all. She showed us about a dozen turtle eggs and then hurried off to make them as a side dish for our ham. We found them on the sands along the shore, said Ernest. But that is all part of our story, Elizabeth interrupted. She spread a tablecloth on the end of a cask and laid out the ham, eggs, and some cheese. It was a lovely sight. As we ate, Elizabeth told her story. This morning, I looked about in hopes of finding a shady place where we might get out of the heat of the sun. But I found not a single tree. This made me think hard. It would be impossible, I said to myself, to remain in this place with no shelter but a miserable tent. The heat was even worse inside it than out in the open. Courage, then I thought. I must explore and find something better. Why not do just that with my younger sons? I will pass over them to the other side of the river and find some well-shaded spot in which to settle. The boys agreed excitedly. We equipped ourselves and started off. We went on until we reached a little wood. Birds were skipping and warbling on the branches of the trees, without being alarmed by us in the least. The trees were enormous, dear husband. The roots formed great shaded arches on the ground. A charming, cool stream flowed at our feet, and we drank from it. It occurred to me that if we could create a kind of tent in one of the trees, we might live there safely. On our return trip home, we found pieces of timber and chests from the wreck. We weren't strong enough to bring them back, but we dragged them onto the sand beyond the reach of the waves. Meanwhile, our dog Flora was found turning over something when she had found in the sand. They were the turtle's eggs. We collected nearly 24 of them. That was when you returned. We ran eagerly toward the river and soon arrived at the shore, where we had found nothing to do but throw ourselves into your arms. That's the end of the reading for today. And what happens next, you will find out on Monday. Again, tomorrow I'm going to take a break from reading, but Monday and all of the next week, I will be back at 4 o'clock to read. This is my dog, Sashka. She loves to listen to the stories as well. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you at 4 o'clock on Monday. Have a great rest of your day.